Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Cooking with Carm. Something to do while sports is on hiatus and we all are self-quarantined. So this is a lasagna recipe today. Everything from obviously fresh mozzarella to fresh noodles to our sauce that you guys saw in a previous video. So a little bit of each with some ground beef, and we're good to go. So step by step, this should be a quick one. Right, so the first thing we're going to do is the sauce is already on the oven and it's warming up. This is some of the sauce that we had made previously, and next up is essentially getting your meat ready while the water boils to blanch the fresh pasta. So we're going to get going with that. All right, so we're going to brown the meat first. Get it going. A little salt. I like to use sea salt for mine. So a couple of pinches of salt. And of course some pepper. Gotta use some pepper. And I pick up what's an Italian seasoning mix. So essentially about a tablespoon and a half of this. All right, and we're gonna brown this and be back for the second part. All right, so the meat is now browned. We don't want to completely cook right through because it's going to cook in the sauce a little later on. So at this point, we remove it from heat, and I'm going to add it to some of the earlier meat I cooked just before we started this, because I'll be making a couple lasagnas today. Today happens to be it's Good Friday here, or it's Good Friday around the world. So obviously, as a Catholic Italian, I'm not going to be eating a meat lasagna today, but I'm preparing a couple. One for my friend Lisa, who's celebrating her birthday today, and for the Prez, because the Prez loves lasagna, and it literally will shut him up for a couple of hours while he's eating it. So we're going to continue on with the mozzarella portion. All right, mozzarella. The one I always use is Tre Stella. I love this mozzarella. Nice fresh mozzarella. You essentially will just grate some of this stuff up. And the great thing about this is, of course, it's fresh. I know that they have the ones that come already ground up in the stores. But if you're making this from essentially scratch while using store-bought items like fresh pasta and your meat, it's always good to still have a fresh mozzarella in it. I think it tastes a lot better, at least this one does, when it's melted. So I'll usually use, if I'm doing a couple of them, a couple of these mozzarellas are good enough, and I'll always eat the extra pieces myself. Right, so we're at the point now where we're going to blanch our pasta. Obviously the water is boiling, so Italians, we love our salt, so we're going to salt the water. Get that going. That's also going to help with the pasta. I normally don't, the reason I use fresh and not the boxed noodles is just because they cook better, the texture turns out to be better, and it's less likely that when you heat it up in the oven later on, that the sauce is going to sort of water down or break down the pasta. So one thing I do, and you'll notice here is, it's a little trick I use. I use napkins, wet napkins, in between the pasta. I warm them up, so when you put it into the hot water, you're not shocking the pasta, you're not blistering it up. So you literally drop it into the hot water. It doesn't need to be in there long, because the majority of the cooking of that, normally if you're cooking fresh pasta, they say 3 to 5 minutes and it's ready. So the fact that you're going to put it in the oven later on at 350 to 375 degrees is more than enough. So essentially this is just to sort of shock the noodle and get some of that starch out right away, because as we talked about before, although starch is really great when with short noodles like fettuccine, spaghetti and stuff, with this type, you don't need to get rid of all of the starch right now, just some of it. So I'm going to put it off to the side, and then you'll see us put it together later. All right, we're ready to go. Take out the container because I'm doing a couple of them for some friends. The sauce is ready, as you can see. So I'm just going to give that one final stir. And we're going to get going on putting this together. Step one is going to be sauce. You're going to want to put plenty of sauce on the bottom because last thing you want, and just kind of move it around, last thing you want is lasagna sticking to the bottom of the pan. So put plenty of sauce. The great thing I like about this pan to the noodles is one lasagna sheet will essentially fill the whole tray. So that'll feed normally 4 people. In my case, it'll feed me for the 1 o'clock and the 4 o'clock football games. Spread the sauce around. At this point you want to add, so plenty of sauce is good. At this point we're going to add the meat. So the meat that we made up earlier, we're going to sprinkle that meat on. Now this is going to be 2 layers of lasagna, 2 layers of meat. So you don't want to overdo it and make it too heavy. And of course now the fresh mozzarella. Mozzarella you can never have too much of. Mozzarella and cheese really make this dish more than anything. And then you're heading back to the next sheet of lasagna. So I'll put the next one on and then I'll show you what it looks like when it's done. So I think one of the biggest things when making a lasagna and where you can screw up the most of anything, now this was fresh sauce that I'm using, but obviously you can use bottled sauce. You're not going to want to be cooking for a long period of time. Italians never really run out of sauce because if you've ever seen our households or if you've ever been to an Italian house, they have a cold cellar, a cantina. It's usually located under the front porch and it's a cold cellar. Forget about Jodie Foster and her, you know, the escape room. This is an actual escape room. Actually, before I put the final layer on, I know Prez likes his chilies, so I'm going to add a little bit heat to this lasagna for him and add some chilies to it. We'll kind of surprise him with this. And then, but yeah, getting back to it, we have cantinas. So the cantina is essentially our escape room. You've got meat hanging from the ceiling. You've got jars of preserve. You've got jars of sauce. You can pretty much do everything in there. And they always have a propane tank with a heater down there. So there's no such thing as an apocalypse if you can get put into one of these. But the other reason for putting a lot of sauce is you're going to heat this up in the oven. So if you don't put enough sauce in this, what is invariably going to happen is this is in the oven for 30 to 45 minutes at 350 or 40 degrees, and that sauce starts to dry up, and then you get hard edges on your lasagna, or it just tastes dry in general. That's where the mozzarella comes in. That's where the sauce comes in. If you've ever gone to a place and then once you're done, you can bring it out, and if you have a little bit of sauce left over, you put it in a plate, you cut it, you pour a little bit of sauce on top of it, and away you go. So that's pretty much it. I tend to use a little bit more mozzarella on top because, like I said, you can never have enough mozzarella, so you can spread a little bit more on top. And then, because these are being picked up a little later, I'm going to put them off to the side. I'm going to wrap them with a little foil. And there you go. Lasagna to go. I'll have the directions and step-by-step with the ingredients you need to make enough lasagna for 46 people. Thanks for watching. All right, we are done. 3 lasagnas. If you're making this lasagna for, let's say, 4 people, even up to 6 people, you can pick up, and I'll always say, get the extra lean ground beef. You can get 2 pounds of that. That's enough for like 3 layers of meat, sauce, and cheese. So you're obviously going to go fresh noodles, meat, sauce, cheese, and so on and so forth, with 3 layers of sauce and cheese. Extra ground beef, because you'll notice that as you're cooking it with the lean or just the regular ground beef, There is a lot of fat in it, obviously, which turns into oil. And if you transfer that over to your pasta later as it's cooking and you eat it, you're consuming that. So just think of like eating extremely greasy onion rings. They're fantastic, but later on you really feel it, and it's not good for you. The sauce, if you're doing it for say 3 to 4 people and you're going with a pound of meat, I would say about 3 jars of sauce. It's better to have more than less. You add another jar if you're making one that's slightly bigger because it's only a little bit more that you're using. So 4 jars is good enough. 3 mozzarellas, buy 3. You might only use 2. It's always good to put like a layer across the top. As you'll see, we're pretty much done, and the lasagnas are ready. You can tell which one is mine, obviously, is the big pan. And then I've got a couple for one of my friends who lives in downtown Toronto. She is celebrating a birthday today, and obviously is stuck at home. And one for the Prez and Vivian, who, even though they're Leaf fans, I added a little extra hot pepper on it. They'll feel it later, and that'll be a little surprise from the Buffalo Sabres fan. Thanks for watching. Ingredients to follow, step by step, and we're going to be back next week with homemade gelato, and the first flavor I'm going to do, of course, is limoncello. So limoncello, and then if I have some time, I'll throw in a raspberry gelato as well too.